Yeah, we're talking about the furniture. It's a podcast. We're talking about the two red chairs that the guests have been sitting in the past. And it's a pillow. One says cunt on it. The other one says for crying out loud. I'm not sure how classy we really,
Jen seemed to like that pillow when she came in.
Well, yeah, I'm sure the people can appreciate it. But, yeah, he was just saying, hey, when we get the guests back in here, can we, would you mind ponying up a little bit? Because I paid for this and I paid for that for a couple of new chairs. And I looked over at these two. I guess they're orange chairs, which have always to me look miserable. Like that's the last chair that I would ever want to sit in if I had to spend an hour and 20 minutes talking to somebody,
No wonder we're running out of gas. Yeah. We need a new chair.
Yeah, exactly. So how you doing, Jim?
I am well.
You're good? You're good?
Well.
Yeah. And Kaylin, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm doing well also.
Okay.
How about you, Michael?
Well, I'm feeling better. I hopefully, I did call you yesterday, Jim. I didn't let Kaylin know as much, but I had some dental surgery done last week. And I'm that idiot who his entire life has gone like, okay, I've had the surgery. Aftercare? What? I don't, throw that paper away. What? I don't. That's that's for pussies, quick. Man. I'm fine. Yeah. I'll be fine. Go home and eat
doctor's orders.
Doctor's orders. Sure. Right. Well, now that I'm fucking 70, I should pay attention to the doctor's orders because
they know what they're talking about.
They do. When it comes to aftercare and the surgery that I had on my mouth, I made it about 10 times worse by not. Just by going like, fuck it. I'll just do whatever I want.
I'll do whatever I want, yeah. you sounded at one point like you had marbles in your mouth.
I felt like
when you were bleeding.
Well, I couldn't. The bleeding couldn't. So of course, I'm on blood thinners too, on top of everything else. So that was the major thing. I wouldn't stop bleeding. Therefore, I couldn't really eat anything. I lost 10 pounds.
Oh my God!
Nobody maybe might have noticed, but I lost 10 pounds. And
you don't carry weight around on you, Michael.
Well, I do, Jim. I go to the gym and I lift weights because I like to have 195, 200. When I'm in front of a camera, like I did on
Onslaught.
Thank you. Yeah, on Onslaught. I wanted to be about 202, 205, or I didn't get up to 205, but at least 200. And I was down at 185 after this situation.
Wow.
But anyway. I feel okay now. I've got this huge cup of coffee next to me.
They sound much better.
What sounds much better?
You do. You sound much better.
Oh, okay. Good.
Clearer. You're speaking more clearly, too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. So, Kaylin, I wanted to get some stuff off my chest.
Yeah.
Just because... I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days because I looked at some of the questions.
Right. So that leads me into just first saying thank you to all the people that have subscribed to the podcast, not only on YouTube,
I really appreciate that.
But also Spotify and Apple. Even if you don't listen on those things, just subscribing to it helps us out a lot.
We really appreciate it.
And there was one comment from a guy who does not listen to Spotify. Shout out to Captain Dunsel 1968 who said, I don't listen to Spotify, but I subscribe. What do I get?
Yeah, I saw that one.
I said, you get a shout out here. But we're also doing another thing. I was like, hey.
I hit like on that one.
Yeah. You get a bunch of just questions in all of the YouTube comments. And I was like, hey, why don't we just read one of the questions every episode just to get answers to some of them because there's a lot pouring in. And it was really funny. I read this. I flagged this one. Hey, I'm going to read this one on the podcast. Didn't tell you ahead of time. Right. And then you came in and went, hey, I really wanted. And I was like, I just flagged that comment from Judge Holden 95 who wrote, great podcast. I'd love to hear the story of them using Michael's likeness for Alien 3.
Okay. So here's the thing about Aliens 3 or Alien 3, whatever it was. And, people always approach me. One of the biggest questions is, what was it like to work with Arnold Schwarzenegger? and I've talked about that before. I didn't really work with him that much, but one of the questions I get asked more often than any other question is, how disappointed were you when they cut you out of Aliens, the franchise? How disappointed were you? How upsetting was that for you? And oh my God, how could they do that? How could they do that? That's just incredible. Like, you must have been devastated. And, actually, the fact of the matter is I didn't really fucking give a shit at all at that time in my life, other than the fact that I knew I wasn't going to get a big payday. Usually when you do when I did Aliens, I came in and replaced Remar. And so what Jim and Gail said to me was like, if you're going to replace him, we want to offer this to you, Michael. You got to come in, but you got to work under his contract, which means that I had to get paid the same amount that he got paid, and I had to be billed the same place that he was billed, which actually I think was behind Newt, but that's kind of a weird thing. But so I got paid like $110,000. So I kind of went down to do it. Obviously, it was a smart thing that I did anyway. But we made the movie. Seemed like it was very successful. I was kind of off and running 2 years later. I did The Abyss with Jim. I don't know what year that Alien 3, whatever they call it, Fincher's.
92.
Okay, it was 92. So, yeah, it was a couple of years after, maybe 2 years after I did The Abyss. And but I didn't. I didn't have any expectations about it. That's all I can remember thinking about when I heard that they weren't going to be using me in the third one, because there was no script. I never read anything. I was like, oh my God, I'd love to play this part. Oh, I didn't get this part. God, I could have killed this. There was just like, well, you're not going to be in it. It's like, oh, fuck. I could have made $500,000 probably at that time in my life. Who knows? That's the only thing that I thought. I didn't know who David Fincher, and I didn't know anything about the project. The fact of the matter was that I was working on a movie with a filmmaker by the name of Avi Nesher. And Avi Nesher had made a movie back in 1984 called Rage and Glory. And it is a movie that, let me see, what is the Lincoln Center, Jim? Do you know?
Lincoln Center in New York. It's a theater, basically. It's the famous theater in New York City, Lincoln Center.
Okay, well, thank you.
It is. It was built around 1960 or so. It's like the premier art house place. Concerts are held there. To play Lincoln Center is pretty much the top of the heap.
Well, Avi Nesher was an Israeli director, and he directed a movie called Rage and Glory. 1984 came out. And the Lincoln Center Film Society said it was one of the 10 best Israeli film movies of all time.
Well, that would be a considerable honor.
Yeah. I mean, a
Lincoln Center honor carries prestige with it.
Right. And this is the Avi Nesher that approached me and offered me a role in a movie called Nameless. And, I went out and watched the movie, and I watched it again last night. And it's a really, really well done movie.
You're talking about Avi's movie.
I watched Avi's movie last night again, and it's a little creaky around the edges because it was shot on such a low budget. But I've described to you what that movie's about. Yeah. I tell anybody that is interested in the Middle East. Can you describe, Jim, kind of about where that movie takes place? It's right when Rommel is kind of heading up towards.
Yeah. It's in the Middle East. It's in the area now, what is now Palestine, the West Bank, etc. Israel, Palestine, Gaza, etc. The West Bank. And it was a chunk of territory. Now, we tell our history in terms of movies. So when Lawrence of Arabia ends, the Lawrences helped unite Arab tribes and join up with the British to drive the Turks out of Arabia and back up into Turkey. And when the war ends, there's all this territory in the Middle East to try to figure out how it's going to get divided up. And the British and the French basically kind of took over dividing it up, drawing lines. And that's how you come up with the state of Iraq, the state of Saudi Arabia. And what was left was this kind of a triangle in the middle called what was called the British Mandate. For about 20 years between wars, that existed as a sort of British protectorate. And there was a lot of dissension and trouble going on there because the Zionist movement had started, and this was a movement by Jews to return to Israel. The Jewish population in that area was only about 10% at the time, but there was a considerable movement for Jews to emigrate to Israel, into that area, into Palestine, especially as Hitler came to power in Germany. And then the urgency became more and more dramatic, and there was considerable opposition to that by the Arabs, and the British, who were running the whole place, began to put the brakes on Jews coming in. And so an underground movement arose to drive the British out, an underground movement of Jews, a number of them. And this movie is about an underground movement during World War II that fought the British to kick them out. After the war was over, that movement more or less succeeded, and the British handed over that territory to the UN in about 1947 and said, you guys decide what to do with it. We're out of here. Yeah. So his movie is about one of these Jewish resistance groups fighting the British early on in World War II.
Correct. Thank you, Jim, because I could never have explained that in any kind of detail.
And we'll come up with movies about this topic that will further illuminate the subject.
Right. But Avi's movie was a really, really good movie. And I watched it and I thought, wow, and this all ties into aliens, and I'll tell you why. And I'm trying to not go in 50 different directions here at the moment. So I really liked Avi's movie.
And that Paul Newman movie, Exodus, from back in the early 60s, covers the same subject matter, the British occupation of the Palestinian region after World War II. So,
well,
there aren't that many movies about it. We can say that.
I got this offer from Avi. And I've forgotten what the money was, but they showed me his film. Back then, I probably had to go to a theater to see it, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really great movie. I thought the script was sort of interesting, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it, man." And this was right in the middle of like right when things were going really well for me. Not that in my head, I was thinking, oh, my career. It was just looking back at it now, it was like, a couple of years after Aliens, a year or two before Tombstone. And I had things were going well. And people always say, well, what happened? And how come Michael Biehn didn't get to be? And God, I get so fucking tired of hearing that. You fucking try it, motherfuckers. You fucking try. Plus raising 5 boys and 3 wives, and I had a lot of shit going on, but anyway, so I wanted to do this movie, and it was being produced by a woman named
Rafaela de Laurentiis.
Thank you.
And had you worked with her on Rampage?
Does she have a credit on Rampage?
I think she does. I know she was, her dad was Dino, and it was.
Well, I met Dino once, and that was kind of an interesting. He was just a bigger than life kind of guy, and But anyway, I don't remember. She might have had a credit on Rampage, but I don't remember her being around much.
You never interacted with her on that.
Not that I remember. I was too busy fucking yelling and screaming back at like Billy. But
I'm not seeing it on her wiki page.
So anyway, I get this offer, and Raffaella De Laurentiis is producing it, and I'm like, okay, we're good to go. The next memory that I have of that movie was having dinner with Raffaella at somebody's house. It might have been her house in Los Angeles. And the film was shot in Los Angeles. I've forgotten whether the director was there or not. But there was a female love attraction, whatever. What do you call it on a movie? The girlfriend?
Love interest?
Love interest, thank you. And love interest. And she was a psychiatrist, and she'd been practicing, she was a practicing psychiatrist. And they told me, I'm not sure if Avi was there, but I know she was there. They told me that they had offered, and she and Patsy Kensit had decided that, yes, she did want to play that role. And my reaction, basically, once, and again, you couldn't just pick up your phone and go, oh, Patsy Kensit, blah, blah, blah. But, very shortly thereafter, I found out Patsy Kensit was 21 years old. And there's not that many, psychiatrists working out there who've got a practice, who are 21 years old, plus look anything like Patsy Kensit looked, at that time on top of it. But that I remember as being, really absurd. And I thought, but I don't have any, once I'm in, I'm in. I don't have any okay, well, and me and Patsy turned out to be a whole thing anyway. But they had some good actors in it, and they had some interesting actors in it. Do you remember Richard Jordan, Jim?
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
of course. He's in a lot of TV stuff. He's in some pretty good movies, like The Friends of Eddie Coyle, the Robert Mitchum movie. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, he was in it, and Robert Culp was in it, and of course, and
I Spy, Robert Culp. Yeah, for sure.
And then this is where I met Billy Blanks. Billy Blanks, who became world famous for Taibo, which was a way of exercising and kind of doing martial arts. And at
one time 20 years ago or so, if you were watching TV late at night, you would run into one of his infomercials.
Well, and that's who I used to work. I met Billy on this show, and I met the person who trained me for this show was named Uzi Gaal. And Uzi was a former Israeli Special Forces guy, and when he trained you, it was serious. Now, the way that I remembered it, he described himself as being a part of the government or a part of the military that he described as, I'm putting my quote fingers up, the unit. That's what he called it. That's where I came from, the unit, which to me had to have been some sort of special forces deal or whatever. And if anybody knows what the unit was, I would really kind of appreciate it. It's been a long time since I actually, Uzi trained me, and man, he trained me out in the ocean. He trained me, hard. And I wanted to do well. I like this movie, and it's the hardest I've ever trained for a movie by far. And I turned Jim Cameron onto Uzi Gaal. And Uzi ended up working with Jim. And when Linda Hamilton did T2, the reason Linda Hamilton looks like a not Sarah Connor in the first movie, which I think is an incredibly important part of T2, is that as soon as you see her transformation, but the person who trained her, and she'll never forgive me for it, she'll never forgive me for it, was Uzi Gaal. Okay, and
was that unit called the Mossad or Shin Bet? Do those names ring a bell?
Of course, I know Mossad. Mossad is something, but he
pretty big.
He called it. He told me some stories about stuff that they used to do, which was pretty hardcore.
Some take out the trash type stuff. Right?
Yeah, well, it's not. it's not for the faint of heart when it comes to what he was dealing with in that unit. And maybe he made up that name. I don't know. Yeah. But I'm telling you, this guy was the real deal. And he worked with Jim for quite a while, and I think that he finally got tired of the movies and went back to Israel. But anyway, so they also had some interesting. So Billy Blanks played a bad guy, and they had some boxers in the show, and maybe you can look it up. But one of them was Ray Boom Boom Mancini. He was one of the. He was one of the bad guys, and they had Carlos. I forget his name, but another great boxer. So they had like all these bad guys, so anyway, we make the movie, and it just did not. It just did not come together. I remember watching the rough cut of it and thinking, and I was watching the rough cut of it, and the director was in an office next to me, and I was screaming, "Oh, fuck this! Oh, fuck! This is bullshit!" And rough cuts are hard to watch anyway, so
they are.
So I was over the top on it, but I don't think I really spoke to him much after watching that rough cut. My point is, getting back to Aliens, how did I find out that I had been somehow? I knew that I wasn't in the movie Aliens 3. I knew that, and I didn't care because I was busy, and the only thing that I remember thinking was, I was going to get paid a lot of money for that, and I guess I'm not anymore. Okay. Oh well. Good luck following.
Yeah, you had a lot of movies lined up at that time. You were busy.
Yeah, and good luck following Jim Cameron, by the way. Yeah. And so, I was just doing my thing, and Raffaella left the set. She went to Europe, and she came back. And she was gone about a week, and she said, "Hey, Michael, I was over at Pinewood Studios, and I saw you at Pinewood." And I said, "Excuse me?" Yeah, I was just over at Pinewood Studios, and you were there too, weren't you? And she was playing around. I'm like, "Raffaella, what are you talking about?" And she then went on to describe to me a Hicks-like figure with my likeness on it, with Hicks's chest completely blown out, as if one of the face huggers had blown out of his chest. And I was like, really? That's what they did with Hicks? And I was at that moment I was pissed because, I put time and love and care and effort into that. And so had Jim Cameron. Now, a lot of people, they'll say to me, "How could they have done this to you? How could they have done this to your character?" The fact of the matter is that Jim Cameron spent the last third of Aliens, his movie, saving Newt. And they fucking kill her too? I mean, the fucking ludicrously stupidness of all of this is just insane.
They pretty well closed the door.
You were a studio guy, Jim. You can identify with some of this shit, right?
That's the product of studio development thinking. That's for sure. Yeah. So they killed off any possibility of following up on Jim's storyline from Aliens.
Yeah. And looking back on it too, the person that everybody really needed to please one way or the other. I've just thought about this in the last couple of days. Really, the person that really had to, the bear in the room or whatever they call it, would have been
the 800-pound gorilla.
The 800-pound, that had to have been Sigourney. Yeah. So, Sigourney, and, I love Sigourney. I love her to death. She was so kind to me, and she's so wonderful, and she'll always be wonderful. And God knows what was going on with David Fincher.
She was kind of a source of strength on that movie, too, wasn't she, on Aliens?
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
But anyway, David Fincher was directing it, and he hadn't had any credits at that time. He was a pretty new guy. And David Fincher, who went on to win Academy Awards for the Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. What was that movie called?
Seven.
Seven.
Social Network. He had, he's got some great credits for sure. The Game, which I think is a real intriguing movie.
Well, he had all sorts of problems on this movie. He is quoted as saying, "Nobody hates Alien 3 as much as I do." Okay, so
it had a really bad word of mouth. I never saw it because I heard it was dark and pointless, and it was set on a prison camp on a planet, deserted, god awful planet somewhere. Newton
Hicks were dead.
And Newton Hicks were dead, and it's Sigourney and Winona Ryder, kind of moping around for the whole movie. I didn't particularly care to see that.
Well, you and a lot of other people, I think,
and most of the other audience for the other two movies. Yeah,
and from what I understand, from what I've read now, since then, David Fincher was a young guy, was just getting pushed all over the place, by the studios. Yeah. So anyway, when I found out they had used a likeness of me, and they had Hicks's chest blown out, I obviously picked up the phone and called my agent, the person that we've talked about before a lot, and that was Ed L'Amato, who's at that point now handling Mel Gibson, and he's handling Richard Gere, and he's handling Michelle Pfeiffer,
Denzel. Yeah. So and Steve Martin and Liam Neeson.
Exactly. He's got all sorts of, and he calls them up. And there was a movie. There's a movie. Obviously, we all know Back to the Future. When they did Back to the Future 2, they took Crispin Glover's likeness and they used it in Back to the Future 2. And Crispin Glover, God bless him, man. He sued, if I'm not mistaken, Steven Spielberg and Universal Studios for them using his likeness in the movie and not paying for it. And he won that lawsuit. And so there was precedent that you can't just take Michael Biehn's image of Hicks and do whatever you want with it without paying him.
In subsequent productions, yeah.
Exactly. So Ed called them up, and and I said to Ed, look, I don't give a shit about the movie one way or the other, but there's no way that I'm gonna, because they started saying, well, we'll pay you $100,000, right? And I was like, I don't need your money, but there was no way Hicks was going to go out like that in my mind. And that's what I said to Ed L'Amato. There's no way that character ends up with fucking last image of him is laying on the ground with some fucking thing coming out of his chest all burst open. I said, fuck that. And so we went back and forth with what would have been Fox, Jim?
Yeah, it would have been Fox.
Yeah. And, we ended up, and David Fincher called me. And I don't remember the conversation very much except for me saying, well, fuck you. And fuck this fucking movie. And I was a lot of F-bombs in that conversation. Of course, I didn't know he was going to go on to become David Fincher. I was just pissed at what they had done. And I can feel myself getting angry now about what they had done to Hicks. It still kind of resonates, like what they thought they could do with Hicks, let alone like the little girl. So so anyway, after me cussing him out and telling him to go fuck himself, and again, Fincher had probably 30 other problems on that movie that were way bigger in his head and much more divisive for him than this thing. I mean, to me, it sounds like everybody was just pushing him this way and that way, and it just sounded like a disaster for him, and I feel bad for him. I'm not. But anyway, I didn't feel bad for him when he called me to say, hey, are you sure we can't leave this in? I understand they're going to pay you some money. And I said, no. I said, absolutely not. So what we eventually ended up doing was that image that they had already shot, and that's what Raffaella had seen, was the dummy laying there after it had been used. And sometimes stuff like that, well, they're not going to use it anymore, just sits around, you know. And that's what she had seen when she was over there. I mean, who knows what would have happened if she hadn't seen that, and that would have just came out in the movie. I mean, that would have been probably a big ass lawsuit that I would have won. But anyway, I don't. And the crazy thing about it is, if you see Tmebomb now, Tmebomb looks like a cheap derivative, not just like a payday. Like I just went in for like a quick payday. It looks like cheap.
It's independent quickie.
Yes, yeah,
in it for the money.
Yes, that's exactly what it looks like. And I went into it with the best intentions of working with this director.
Well, Tmebomb is what the movie Nameless eventually became.
Yeah, they changed the name. That just kind of goes to show you the movie that I wanted to make was Nameless, and the movie that I guess I don't know who, but they ended up making Tmebomb. And, you know, cast 21-year-old Patsy to play a psychiatrist who really shouldn't be any younger than in her early 30s. And then surrounded us by Carlos Palomino. I think that was the name of the other fighter. A bunch of bad guys. And Billy Blanks I ended up working with. Uzi Gaal ended up being a good friend and trainer of mine.
Ray Mancini was kind of a well-known figure at that time. Warren Zevon even wrote a song about him.
Well, Ray Mancini is a wonderful fighter. I think he's out of New York or New Jersey or something like that. And he killed a man in the ring.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and that kind of changed his trajectory when it comes to boxing. You know, that whole you kill a guy, and I guess that weighs pretty heavy on you. So just getting back to like, oh, weren't you so disappointed? No, I was not disappointed at all. And I've always said, looking back in it, I fucking dodged a bullet. I dodged a bullet. I could have gotten paid $500,000, but I would have been in that horrible third one if I was in it. And, you know, that just turned out to be terrible. And I've said this about Terminator 2 is, you know, it's really hard to follow Jim Cameron. So, Cameron did Terminator. Then he did T2. But after that, good luck with it all, guys. And same with Aliens. Of course, Ridley Scott directed Alien, and then we had Jim doing Aliens. And then, you know, after that, you just don't follow Jim Cameron. And I think the audiences, when they see a movie like Aliens or see a movie like Terminator or Terminator 2, they just expect, okay, the third one's going to be just like that. I think that people just sort of think that. And so if I am...
when the first two go off so well.
Sometimes when I go out and I'm signing photos and stuff like that, people ask me all the time, how many of these... what is this thing we're doing here? What is this called?
Podcast?
Podcast, thank you. How many of these have we done now? Because I want to go and say, you got to go to the podcast and you've got to go back to whatever number this is.
Right, so this is number 31.
31? We did 31 of them?
Yeah.
Fuck. Jim, 31.
I know.
Yeah. You know? Did you know that? You didn't know that.
I figured it was around 30.
Last
time I tried to count, it was in the high 20s.
Jim's got such an incredible memory. It's so great to have on the show. I've always loved talking to him and hanging out with him. And I was telling him earlier today that I got talking to him, and I still can't get it up. I want to see it. There's a Paul Newman movie called Sometimes a Great Notion. And I mentioned it to Jim, and he immediately was like, "Oh, Ken, is it Ken Kesey, Jim? Yeah,
it was Ken Kesey.
Oh, yeah, hold on a second. Ken Kesey. Yeah, he did that one, and he did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and you started describing to me about this.
Well, you
go ahead.
said that you heard the book was written from the chief's point of view.
Correct.
And I said, yeah, that was the major change in the movie. The movie was, straight on omniscient point of view, but the book is told from the chief's point of view.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest we're talking about.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was written while Ken Kesey was doing these LSD experiments down at a VA hospital in Menlo Park when he was a grad student at Stanford. And he was doing these LSD experiments. He was also working in the psych ward at this hospital. So he was tripping when he wrote that book, and he was in a psych ward. And I remembered, I read that book 50 years ago, before the movie came out.
But you remember the first line of the book, right?
The first line from it. The first line is, they're out there, black boys who commit sex acts at night and clean them up before morning. And he's talking about the orderlies on the ward. And that's how the book starts. Well, some opening lines in books you can remember, like Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, opens with, we were somewhere around Barstow on the edge of the desert when the drugs took over. So, that one you remember. I remember that opening line. But, I was at Stanford shortly after. I saw Ken Kesey once when he came to campus and talked for a while. So I was very much kind of steeped in Ken Kesey culture. I read Cuckoo's Nest while I was at Stanford. I hadn't quite realized that he had written it while he was there, but. And then I saw a production of the play in San Francisco before the movie ever came out.
Well, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has always been, one of my top 10 movies, without a doubt.
One of the few movies that won all 5 major awards.
Is it? Best director, best
director, screenplay, actress.
And supporting actor and supporting actress?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
But
you said 5.
The 5 are screenplay, director, movie, actor, actress.
Okay.
And I know 3 that won them. It Happened One Night, Silence of the Lambs, and Cuckoo's Nest.
Well, Jim, didn't Nurse Ratched win an Academy Award for that too?
So that was Louise Fletcher.
Yeah, but that would have been that's not leading. She didn't get leading actress. That would have been.
Yeah, she did.
Oh, it's leading actress. Oh, okay.
Leading actress.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it deserves it. It deserves it. It's a wonderful, 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 wonderful movie.
It really brilliantly came together how that movie.
And that was originally purchased by Michael Douglas.
It was purchased by Kirk Douglas when it first came out, and he wanted to do it for years.
Yeah,
and I think he did a stage version of it in New York. There was a play written by a guy named Dale Wasserman. I saw that version of it, and I think Kirk played it in New York for a little while, but then he just kind of got a little too old for the part and handed it off to his son in the 70s.
Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas, yeah.
Yeah, who put that movie together and
produced it with a record producer from the Bay Area named Saul Zaentz, who had made his money on Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Wow.
And he had a company called Fantasy Record and Films, and Fantasy put up the money for Cuckoo's Nest.
Well, I've always thought by far that was Jack Nicholson's greatest role. I've always, it's always been in my head.
And that's a long list to choose from, too.
Well, a lot
you
of
put
great.
Chinatown in there.
Well, listen, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I think for the first time, I don't think I'd ever seen it, The Last Detail.
Yes.
Holy motherfucking goddamn, was he good in that movie? Oh my God, he was, and that movie, The Last Detail. That movie holds up really, really
It really
well.
does.
Who directed that?
Hal Ashby.
Hal Ashby.
Very early. Hal Ashby. Robert Towne wrote the screenplay based on a book, and Hal Ashby and Robert Towne would team up again for Shampoo, which I think is a terrific movie. And I mean, those guys were talents working at their peak in those days.
Hey, Jim, here's a movie I want to ask you about, because I watched it this week, and I've tried to watch it like 3 or 4 times, and I just I don't get why people love it so much, and maybe you could explain to me what I'm missing when it comes to Peter Bogdanovich's first movie, the black and white one that he did.
Oh, Last Picture Show.
The Last Picture Show. What do people love so much about that? Is that a picture, Jim, that you watch and you go back to and you go like, I love this movie. I'll watch it 3, 4. Like, I've seen Taxi Driver 10 times. I've seen Godfather 1 and 2 10 times. I've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest 10 times. I've seen, but is that?
I think that's a movie people remember more fondly, in retrospect than to say, like right now, if you were to list a number of movies for me to watch right now, I wouldn't pull that one near the top of the list coming from that era, But I thought it was a very good movie. I think it was his debut of sorts. He had made a quickie Roger Corman thing with Boris Karloff before that, but this was his first.
Hey, Jim. Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt. Tell the audience where Amblin came from, because we all know Amblin is.
Well, I was about Picture Show. I was going to say,
Go ahead.
Thought that movie was extremely well written, beautifully observed. Ben Johnson really comes to the fore in that movie. He's got some of the best lines. He's a much beloved character in the movie.
He was great in it. He was. He was
terrific in it. It was so well observed. I mean, the performances were almost immaculate, and I just thought the writing was really sharp. I mean, it's a coming of age story, and it not a lot that happened, but it just was so, like I said, so well observed. And then Bogdanovich followed that with Paper Moon and What's Up, Doc?
That was
movies
fun.
that made a ton of money.
Yeah.
You mentioned Amblin, and that's the name of Steven Spielberg's production company. It's been in existence for 55 years.
That's how we all know. That's how I've always known about it.
Yeah,
The name of
Amblin. Amblin is Spielberg's company. They have that great funky office over on the Universal lot that they've had for 40 years or more. It looks like a building from the Southeast American architecture. But Amblin was the name of Spielberg's first theatrical film. It wasn't a feature film. It was a 20-minute short that he directed in 1968. No dialogue in the movie, but it's a short of two people hitchhiking from somewhere in the desert to a beach.
Did you say Phoenix to L.A.?
Something like Phoenix to L.A.
And wasn't Spielberg from Phoenix?
Phoenix. He was from Phoenix,
right?
And this was basically, the story of his move to L.A. I don't think it was exactly the story of his move to L.A., but it was, about two people who meet, a guy and a girl who meet while hitchhiking, and there's no dialogue, just music, and beautifully shot movie, really well shot. Alan Davio shot it, who would later shoot a number of big deal movies. And it was a 20-minute short. It caught the eye of Sid Sheinberg at Universal, and he hired Spielberg to a contract with Universal TV. And they actually put that movie out in theaters. I saw it in a theater.
Yeah. Amblin, you saw in the theater, right?
Yeah, I saw it in a theater.
Okay. And then talk to me a little bit about the episodic show that Spielberg did.
He was hired by Sid Sheinberg to work for Universal TV, and they gave him an episode of an anthology series called Night Gallery that was supposed to be kind of like Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of
remember it. I was there. I was around that.
Yeah, exactly. They gave him an episode of that. I think Joan Crawford was.
Yes.
He was. And here's this. I mean, he was being known as kind of a wonder kid. At the age of 21, he's directing Joan Crawford in a TV movie.
21.
At the age of 21, and then he got another TV movie with Dennis Weaver where he really got to show his stuff. I mean, the Night Gallery thing was basically set in her apartment, but with the Dennis Weaver movie Duel, he got to go back out on the road, which is where he had made Amblin, and so he gets another road movie, and that movie really haunted people. That movie really affected people, and it's basically the story of this guy, Dennis Weaver, who's driving along rural California highway somewhere, and this truck starts following him, and it won't stop.
Right.
It just follows him and follows him. It's creepy as hell. You can see why the people who were putting Jaws together looked at that movie and said, "Hey, here's a guy who can make this inanimate object really creepy and terrifying. You know, he might be a good choice for a director for this thing." So he made Duel, and then he came across this story of a true story about two kind of dumb kids in Texas who broke out of pre-release from prison. The guy was about to be released in this hopeless quest.
Hold on a second, Jim. I want to interrupt you because I could listen to you, and I know, but this is something that I wanted to talk about. And last week, I believe it was the last episode of this, we talked about a movie called Straight Time, which was a movie that Dustin Hoffman was in and was all over, and a movie that I had a connection to, and a movie that I thought, is a really great Dustin Hoffman movie and a great character that people don't. I asked Caitlin when I came in.
Real kind of departure from what you expect from Dustin Hoffman too.
Really, especially when later years when you see Tootsie and all the kind of like
Man and
yeah. And so
Kramer versus Kramer, yeah.
So I was trying to think of like if and you, Caitlin, you can do the same thing. If you can think of one, or if anybody in the audience wants to like throw something out, I was trying to come up with another movie that we could talk about when for this week. That is a movie that I've always thought is just a really brilliant, really well done movie, and it's Spielberg's movie, and nobody really knows about it. But have you ever seen, I'm asking Kaylin now, Jim, have you ever seen Sugarland Express?
No.
Sugarland Express, Jim, go ahead, but explain a little bit about Sugarland Express. Because it is, Goldie Hawn is like, everybody's phenomenal. William Atherton, Michael Sachs, is it Ben Johnson, Jim?
Yes. So we were just talking about from
the Last Picture Show.
Ben Johnson had been a fixture in Westerns in the 1950s. Ben Johnson is one of the henchmen who gets killed in Shane.
Oh, he is? Oh, that's a great Western. That's a great Western. Oh,
and he's in the Wild Bunch. He and Warren Oates play those two brothers in the Wild Bunch. So he was a fixture when Spielberg picked him to play the head of the top cop in the movie. It was a story that Spielberg had come across and wanted to do, and he worked on a script, and then he got into business with two producers who were the hottest producers.
Hold on, Jim. Jim, let me interrupt you for a second, a second, because I wanted to say one of the things about this movie, and I believe the movie that we were talking about earlier that Avi did. Rage and Glory, based on a true story, based on real events, that type of thing. And I believe that Sugarland Express opens with that also, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
and this takes me back to the Coen brothers and Fargo, and basically Fargo being based on real events, based on a real crime. And, when you watch Fargo and you're watching it, the idea that it was based on real events, it helps you go like, this is fucking crazy, man. I can't believe this fucking happened. This is fucking unbelievable. Well, in that situation, it didn't happen. They just fucking made it up. They said it was based.
Yeah, they threw that on as a joke. I always loved the opening of what Bill Goldman put on his Butch Cassidy and the Sundance screenplay. It reads, "Not that it matters, but most of what follows is true."
You're right. Yes, yes, that's another great movie. But Goldie Hawn, but right from the very beginning of this movie, oh my God, she's delicious.
She's just in the opening shot. Not the exactly opening shot. I love the opening shot is of a road sign, so it's a Spielberg movie on the road for sure. But yeah, she's in the very opening of the movie and in virtually almost every frame after that. Not all, but quite a bit of the movie, and she really dominates it completely.
Oh, she's so good, and William Atherton is so good, and it is, it's a movie again, and maybe again somebody from the audience, Jim, you or Kaylin, maybe you can come up with a movie because these last two have been my picks of like, hey, these are movies that I don't think people are that aware of, and one's Spielberg, one's Dustin Hoffman, and
Spielberg came across this story and really liked it, and by then, those two producers, David Brown and Richard Zanuck,
I met them.
You know those guys. They were
Jaws
the
2. I met them for Jaws 2.
Okay.
Dennis Quaid played it, I think. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's true.
The terrible one.
But they had just done The Sting a year or two before, and they were writing really hot.
Oh yeah.
They bought the rights to Jaws. They had seen Duel. They were talking to this young guy, and they were going to do Jaws at Universal, and they were talking to this young director on the lot, and he brought them this story, and they said, "Okay, this is kind of good." The story of Sugarland Express, and they wound up getting two young screenwriters out of UFC, Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, to stitch together a script, and it's a really well written script. And that movie, I watched it again last night, and I was just really awed by the accomplishment of it, the professionalism of it, just
Spielberg was 25 when he directed it.
He was 25 when he made this movie.
Yeah.
I remember going to see the movie with a great deal of anticipation because of the rave review I'd read in the New Yorker from Pauline Kael. Probably the most influential movie critic in history. For years, she wrote for the New Yorker. Her last name is spelled Kael, and she was extreme. I used to read her religiously, and she had really extolled this movie. And in fact, there's a quote here from her. She wrote about the movie: "In terms of the pleasure that technical assurance gives an audience, this is one of the most phenomenal debut films in the history of movies." And he hadn't even made Jaws yet.
Right.
So I think the fact that Jaws was such a phenomenal hit, it tends to overshadow what he accomplished with Sugarland Express. In some respects, I think it's the movie of Spielberg that's got more genuine emotion and heart to it than most anything else he did, with some obvious exceptions, of course. But this has such the characters really seem to come alive. They really.
Right from the very beginning when she shows up at the jail and says they're trying to take her baby. It's a story about a couple that think that they're losing their baby, and the William Atherton
welfare's coming taking baby Langston, and she says,
William Atherton has got like 2 months left to serve on
and he's going to get out of jail. And she came to break him out.
And she because they're trying to take their baby away from them. And wow.
She does convince him.
No, she does.
She
uses all her.
It's a minimum security place. It's visitors' day. She just brings some extra clothes for him. She wears these extra clothes.
Yep.
For him, and he walks out, and they wind up commandeering a cop car in the next scene, and the movie is basically them with this Michael Sachs cop hostage trekking across Texas, believing they're going to just go pick up their baby and everything's going to be normal after that. They're extremely naive.
Yeah.
And Ben Johnson plays the head of the Texas public safety. He's like the top cop in the movie, and
Yeah.
he's really he just realizes that they're dumb kids over their head,
Yeah.
and he doesn't really want harm to come to anybody. But the situation just kind of plays out beyond his control. But it's so well. I mean, so well shot. I couldn't believe how I
And
didn't see it.
but what's it did the music? The same guy who did Jaws.
It was his first collaboration with John Williams.
John Williams. There you go.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you know, I mean, you got John Williams doing the music. I've always kind of felt like if you have any movie, no matter what movie you have, if you've got John Williams doing the music, you've got a hit. It doesn't make any difference how good the movie.
Halfway there. You're halfway there already.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, you can see why he kept John Williams for every other movie he did after that, with a couple of exceptions. But
yeah, so I'm just throwing.
And it's not. I mean, it's got great humor for it, and it comes along in a kind of chain of lovers on the run movies, like The Getaway. With it had just come out a year or two earlier with Steve McQueen.
Yep.
And Ally McGraw, and the Badlands with Martin Sheen.
Oh, Badlands was
remember
a great
that?
one.
That
was based
Malick movie.
That was based on a character who was a garbage collector in Lincoln, Nebraska, and that's where I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. Charlie Starkweather, and from what the way that we used to hear it when we were kids was that he used to pick up our trash. Now, whether he actually picked up trash at our house, but he was from Lincoln, Nebraska. He used to, this is what I remember being a kid, but that movie is Sissy Spacek, and God, I've forgotten. That's another one that I could have brought up next week and gone,
yes.
If you haven't seen this movie, Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen. Oh,
real young Martin Sheen.
Real young Martin Sheen. Kind of a James Dean Martin Sheen.
Very much in the James Dean mold. Yeah. That's where you thought he was going to go. And then he shows up like 2 or 3 years later in replacing Harvey Keitel in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that was a kind of a debut film for a director named Terrence Malick.
Malick. Is it Malick? Is it pronounced Malick? I always thought it was Malick.
I'm not sure. Malick. Yeah, I think Malick is the more used pronunciation. But
it's a great movie. It's a great movie.
Oh, it's really,
also
really
one, Jim, that that was not a huge hit either, was it?
No, not really. It's narrated by Sissy Spacek, and she has this sort of dry delivery. She was only the real woman that she's based on was only about 15 at the time. When he went on the rampage, when Starkweather went on the rampage.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well. Is there anything else that?
Well, I'll just throw one out there. You said just underrated movies, whatever, and I'm not gonna know. I don't know half the movies you're talking about. These older movies, so mine's newer, and mine immediately went to comedy. And this is just a comedy that has made me laugh like harder than so many movies, and I never ever hear it being brought up. And it's the original Death at a Funeral.
What's it called?
Death at a Funeral.
Death at a Funeral.
Yeah.
Jim, do you know that movie?
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's like a British comedy with Matthew McFadden, who everyone knows now from Succession.
Okay.
And it's about, his dad who dies and everyone getting together for the funeral. And Alan Tudyk plays like the American in it who accidentally takes like a huge hit of acid instead of
as it goes, as it happens.
Been there, done that.
He goes in to get like a Valium because he's meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time at this big funeral, but he accidentally takes a giant dose of acid instead. And I have laughed harder at his performance. Death at a Funeral. Chris Rock remade it later, and it's horrible.
Chris Rock remade it.
Yeah, but not that one. The original one with Alan Tudyk. Peter Dinklage is in it. 2007.
Oh, wow.
And it is a great fucking comedy that I never hear brought up.
Frank Oz directed it. It should be pretty good.
What else has he done, Jim?
Frank Oz?
Yeah.
Well, he was a product of the Muppets.
Right.
Yeah, he
right.
was Yoda in the Star Wars.
Did Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
He directed
Dirty
Little Shop of Horrors, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which I think is a very funny. What About Bob?
Oh yeah. Well, the stories between Dreyfuss
and Murray,
on that movie that I've spoke to Dreyfuss a little bit about that, and Dreyfuss.
I was just reading about that. There was a recent article about that, and that movie was made 35 years ago.
Yeah.
What About Bob?
Yeah, and that's a very, very good movie. Dreyfuss seemed to, he had that relationship. He had the relationship with the guy in Jaws, who, was what's the famous English actor who's like does this speech in Jaws, Jim. Go ahead and swallow whatever it is you're eating. It's fine. Your answer wasn't coming fast enough, so I knew that.
It's Robert Shaw.
Robert Shaw.
Yeah.
And Robert Shaw does that great monologue in Jaws, which really kind of holds that. I wouldn't say it holds that movie together, but boy, is that an important part of Jaws.
That was written by John Milius.
Jaws was the movie,
the scene that monologue was John, because that screenplay was kind of cobbled together by everybody. A lot of people put hands into that one, and the credited screenwriter, like Carl Gottlieb, you never saw him as a credited screenwriter much after that. But that particular, are you talking about the Indianapolis monologue?
Yes.
That was John Milius's handiwork.
Well, from what I understand, Robert Shaw, was drinking throughout that entire movie, and is brilliant in the movie. But when it came time for them, and if you watch the scene between him and Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss, they look like they're all fucking hammered. There's just like no doubt in my mind that they're all fucking hammered. But from what I understand, and this is just me hearing something that I read or somebody told me that he was too fucked up to play the scene the night that they were supposed to shoot that scene. And that
I think you're right.
Yeah, he had to come back.
I think you're right. Yeah.
He was too fucking drunk. They all got too fucking hammered. It's a fun scene, but you can tell they're all fucking wasted. That was anyway. I can't remember. I was doing Tombstone. And I never, the only times I ever drank on a movie was when it was like some shitty fucking thing up in Canada. I was getting paid. Like I never, like with Friedkin or Bay or Jim Cameron or like working with Demi Moore or working like I never drank.
Who was the director on that Demi Moore movie?
He was an Australian guy. And that movie, here's another thing where people go, well, how come? I can name some movie. That movie, it was a pretty good movie. And it just didn't do any business. Are you looking it up?
Yeah, it's The Seventh Sign, directed by Carl Schultz.
Carl Schultz? Is he Australian? I thought he was an Australian dude. Carl Schultz doesn't sound right, but Hungarian-Australian. Okay. Well, close enough. My memory's not that bad. I didn't remember the Hungarian part of him, but people talk about your career and you should have and why didn't you and all this, and that's a movie that I made that I thought was a really good movie. You got to remember the movies that I made with Jim Cameron were all Jim Cameron movies. And all of his movies were always Jim Cameron movies. When I stepped out to do a movie that was not Jim Cameron movie, I did the Friedkin movie, which got fucking buried. I did this movie with Demi Moore, which is a pretty good movie.
Yeah, it was a big studio movie.
Yeah, but it didn't fucking do any business at all. And then I went out and made that fucking horrible movie Navy SEALs, which we've talked to, like that whole experience. And so I can understand how a studio would go, geez, this guy Michael Biehn seems to do pretty good when he's got fucking Jim Cameron, when he's working with Jim Cameron, but when he's not working with Jim, he's not exactly pulling them in the way that Bruce Willis is, and Alec Baldwin, you know. And you know, I also had I had so much money going out and coming in, and I had, like I said, so many kids and so many, you know, I just kept working. I didn't really pay any attention to a career. And so anyway, I get a little bit tired of
this movie. Is funny though. This came up on another podcast that I do, the one with all my friends, the one that I do, the water cooler with all the guys I work with, Adam Carolla. And we have like a Facebook group, and people chime in, and you come up every once in a while, and some first person on Facebook, they're writing in, they go, oh, top Michael Biehn movies ranked, and it's 5, and they go, you know, Aliens, Terminator, Tombstone, The Rock, whatever, and then he goes, The Seventh Sign. Yeah. And what the fuck is The Seventh Sign? Yeah. I have no idea. And then we started busting the balls of the guy, because I was like, I haven't even heard of this movie, and you putting that at the 5 spot of Michael Biehn movies, like, I was like, maybe I should watch it.
It's a good movie. Yeah, go ahead.
There are comments that mention movies I never even heard of. Like Deadfall.
Oh, let's not bring up Deadfall. Jesus. Okay. Oh, God. Hey, can we drop that? Can we drop the sound out on that one? Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about Deadfall, because we'll just kind of wrap it up on Deadfall, because Deadfall look it up, Deadfall. It's got a great cast, okay? So I was in New York. I was working with Forrest Whitaker, and Forrest Whitaker was directing me in his first film. And as I've said before on this podcast, I don't know what I was doing wrong on that movie, but it just didn't seem like I was like the only white guy around. And there seemed to be sort of like a reverse kind of racism thing. I don't, you know, like it was weird. I played the cop in it. So therefore, you know, I guess if you're a black person and you're young and, you know, your idea of cops in New York City are different than if you're a white person. But anyway, that was just a very difficult experience for me. But I was working with him on that show, and I was in New York. And I got a call from Ed, and Ed said that Val Kilmer and Joanne Wally Kilmer just dropped out of a movie called Deadfall. And they are offering it to you. And I was like, well, who's involved? Well, Nicolas Cage is in it. And then can you pick the other cast members?
Nick Cage, Charlie Sheen.
Keep going.
Peter Fonda.
Keep going.
James Coburn.
Keep going.
Sarah Trigger.
Keep going.
Talia Shire.
Yeah. I mean, that.
Mickey Dolenz?
Yeah, Mickey Dolenz. I'd love to get him. I'd love to get him on this, on this to talk to him, because I was on an airplane once, and because we were on that set together, you know, and he's the last surviving monkey. You know, really? And, yeah. Wow. Well, the other three have been gone for quite a while, actually. Yeah. And he was just really fun to talk to. I really enjoyed it. My stories. Oh my God. Oh my God. Well, you know, he produced, what's the name of that singer who died, and they buried him on the day of the earthquake? It's a famous singer, songwriter. Nielsen Smilson. Who's that?
Oh, Harry Nilsson.
Harry Nilsson. Oh, he produced a documentary on Harry Nilsson and his stories about Harry Nilsson. Oh my God, they're incredible. They buried Harry Nilsson, and right about the time Mickey Dolenz tells this story that about the time they buried him, they put him in the ground. They had the funeral at whatever site it was. What's the big one, Jim? In
Forest Lawn?
Forest Lawn, yeah, someplace like that. 60, 80, 100 people there. And put them in the ground. Everybody kind of falls off, and there's like 2 or 3 of them left, kind of hanging around, having a cigarette, talking. And that's when the earthquake that year of the earthquake hit, the big one in Northridge, and it
was the Northridge earthquake.
And and Mickey Dolenz is like the fucking, even like the earth is like, we don't want him. We don't want this guy, you know. Mickey Dolenz would be just great to have on.
That's funny because he died January 15th, 1994, and I think the earthquake was just a couple of days later.
Well, there you go. But getting back to what's that movie?
Deadfall. Yeah.
I have a Freudian slip about that movie because it's Freudian because it was so terrible. I think it might get 0 on the Rotten Tomatoes. It might get like 0. And boy, Val Kilmer sure knew when to fucking duck out of that thing. You know, I knew I was in trouble when I showed up. Oh, and it turns out that it has such a... What's it get?
Well, it's actually not rated by the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, but with the audience, it has a 25.
Yeah, okay. Well, that means 1 out of 4 people actually liked it. But, I got to know James Coburn I almost bought James Coburn's house. Boy, I should have done that a long time ago. He had a great piece of property. But I got to know Coburn really, really well on that movie, and he was a fascinating person to be around, and so was Mickey, and the only reason this cast and Talia Shire, the only reason this cast had come around and we're on this movie is because the director was named
Christopher Coppola.
Christopher Coppola. Okay, so that's Francis Ford Coppola's son, I suppose, right, or nephew.
Yeah.
Parents.
Anyway,
his not children. Yeah, no, yeah.
Nephew or son?
Not son. No. Yeah. So Francis Ford Coppola was his uncle.
Oh, was his uncle? Okay, is his uncle. And so, but that's how that cast came. But you can imagine me going like listening to Michael, Val Kilmer and his wife just dropped out of this. These are the people that are going to be in it. These are the people that are already signed up. I'm like, yeah, I'm down. And I'd read the script. It was a Nick Vallelonga script.
Yeah.
That was the very first time I'd ever worked with Nick Vallelonga, who would go on. I'd love to get him on here too. Who would go on?
Yeah.
Like what? How many years ago did he do Green Mile?
Well, about five or six.
Green Book. 2018 is Green Book.
Yeah. Well, he wrote and produced. He won 2 Academy Awards.
He won 2 Academy Awards for that.
Yeah, and then got sort of blacklisted.
And it was about his father.
It is about his father. And I've done about 4 or 5 movies with him. And his dad used to always be on the set. The Lip. They used to call him.
Tony the Lip.
Yeah. And I used to be on the set with the character that guy who's
Viggo Mortensen.
Vigo played. Yeah. Didn't Vigo win an Academy Award for that? Or the movie, so. Or maybe the black singer.
The movie did. And I think Marshall Ali won as well.
Yeah. Anyway,
he did. Yeah. Mahershala Ali won for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Nick had said something had something to do with Trump or Muslims or something, and boy.
Oh, he made a tweet about, there were Muslims cheering it during 9/11 or something like that effect.
And they really...
echoing some Trump tweet about Muslims in Jersey cheering 9/11, cheering the buildings.
The company that he made that movie for, the company that he wrote that movie for, and the company that made that movie, they really turned their back on him. When
everybody
that was
involved with it turned their back on him. I mean, it came out like right before the awards, and he really did get he had a movie set up with Lady Gaga after that.
Yes,
that
he did.
Yanked out.
I've read that script. I read that script. It's one of the best scripts I have ever read. And anyway, okay. So we're gonna wind. Oh, okay. But just to lastly about this thing, because Deadfall, worked on it. Good script, and I kind of knew when I was in trouble because I went to like a rehearsal. We had a couple of rehearsals, before we started shooting. And Christopher Coppola kind of had this, who's the director who just died, who smoked all the time and played Spielberg in the... played Spielberg in the Spielberg... But
David
director... David Lynch,
yeah.
Kind of had this. He had this long, like, corn cob pipe sort of thing. He had like a, what's the name of that famous general in World War II?
MacArthur.
Yeah, he had corn cob pipe. He kind of had this whole thing going on, the way he dressed and the way he carried himself, as if like he was MacArthur, and but I kind of knew we were in trouble when I went up to the first rehearsal, and he wanted to do one of those things where, like, you act like you have a ball in your hand, and it's a hot ball, and you, like, pass it on to the person next to you, the other actor. Oh, it's hot. I have to pass it on. Oh, he dropped it. I pick it. Oh, it's hot, And it's like, oh, boy. I can remember doing this in high school, man.
Are you doing that with, like, Nick Cage and Charlie Sheen?
Well, I don't remember. It was some cast members, It might have been his way of testing. It might have been his way of testing me to see how good I was with the old hot ball as compared to, yeah. But and of course Nicholas only did it because it was his brother or his brother. Yeah, it's his brother. And Nicholas, I think, was really hot. I think he was leaving Las Vegas was right about that time.
I think so. Yeah.
And anyway, that turned out to be just...
What was that in relation to The Rock? The Rock came along a year or two later, didn't it?
Dude, don't ask me questions. You know better than to ask me questions like that.
You look it up, Kalen. I think it came along a year or two after that, but
well, it was a fucking mess. It was not TriStar.
Yeah.
Trimark. Is there something?
Trimark? A little bit of a difference. Yeah, it was Trimark.
I remember I was getting ready. I was getting ready to do Tombstone, and I had grown my mustache out. And Trimark wanted me to come back and do reshoots on that movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, Ed, fuck that, man. I got this mustache going. I can't fucking shave my mustache off like a month before, whatever.
Yeah.
Somehow, Ed, I'm not sure who was pulling who's whatever, but, Ed said, listen, Michael, you really need to go back and do this for Trimark. And so I went back and did reshoots, which, of course, anytime you hear about reshoots on a movie or like extra shooting, that's like 99 out of 100 times, it's never going to fucking make your movie better because you don't really, a couple of day picking up a little extra footage,
Moving the lawn chair, the deck chairs on the Titanic.
That's exactly right. So I had to shave off my mustache, but anyway, I was able to grow it back in time. We probably got pushed a month or something on Tombstone, and
Deadfall
brings us back to Val Kilmer, like being able to make Val Kilmer made all the right choices. How come he didn't end up a fucking movie star? He did, but at the end of his career, like before he got sick, he was not doing.
So Deadfall came, right before Tombstone. It was before The Rock. It was right after K2, which I know a lot of people want to hear about your stories about K2 as well.
K2 is one of the things I've always been proud about is the fact that when I worked with, and maybe I've already said this today, but the directors that I worked with, like Frank Rodham, who directed K2, they worked with me again. I worked with him on...
You'd worked with him 10 years earlier almost.
Yeah.
6 or 8 years earlier, and on Lords of Discipline.
Correct. And then Billy Friedkin, we've talked about him before. I'm probably the only actor in the history of Billy Friedkin that has ever done two with him, that was willing to go 2 rounds with Billy Friedkin. And, of course, I've done 3 or 4 with Jim. And we had on the showrunner from Magnificent Seven, who, we had
John
Watson, would love to, if he had something, I know would use me again. That's something I've always been very, very proud about. But anyway, yeah, Deadfall, it was just fucking terrible. And it was a pretty good script. And it didn't help that he had a corncob pipe in his mouth the entire time he was directing it. That didn't seem to carry through into making it a great movie. But boy, he had like a vibe of probably like Spielberg had when he was 25 and he was doing Sugarland Express. He had a vibe of like he knew exactly what, Michael
when he was directing Ben Johnson.
I was right from the very beginning, because I had just left New York and I flew straight to, I think we shot it in L.A. We went straight to L.A. And then went straight into rehearsals. And I remember the first day doing the fucking high school, junior high acting class stuff. Like, okay, let's pantomime like you've got a plate of beans and the beans keep falling off the fork. Let's see that, Michael. I'm like, oh boy, what the hell am I doing here? And Val was smart enough to get the fuck out of that one, man.
Val snipped this one out in the nick of time.
Yeah. So much for not being able to pull out of a movie a week before they start.
I was just reading that when he left, the Trimark cut the budget in half.
Oh, well,
so and that showed, I'm sure.
Well, that makes me feel bad because I didn't know I was only half worth of what fucking Val Kilmer was at that point. But it was him and his wife, and Joanne was pretty hot at that time too.
Oh yeah. Well, she'd been in Navy SEALs with you.
All my winners are coming up today. All my winners. All right, listen, we're over time. I just want to thank everybody who listens, and I know that we've got a little core crowd now.
And
I enjoy doing this so much, and I've got so many more stories about people that I've worked with, and I get to do this with my son, who I love so much, and I'm just having a great time doing this, and I just want to thank you for, sticking with us and, just fooling about. All right, Jim?
I'm here.
All right. Galen, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, man. Bye-bye.